Hello everyone and welcome to Plot Twist. So today I'm joining the rest of my fellow booktubers and I am doing a video talking about my mid-year check-in. There's a lot of things that I considered for this video, including the mid-year book freakout tag, but instead what I think I'm going to do is go over some reading stats, and then I have picked my favorite book that I've read in March through June, so we'll be talking through those. I do have 1 month, March, where I couldn't just pick one favorite, so I do have 2 for that month. So I guess I have 7 books we're going to talk through and some reading stats. Hopefully I will be able to include a bunch of graphs to give you a visual along with my stats that I'm going to try to put up here. We'll see how that works. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So far in 2021, I have read 57 books, which is absolutely insane. That's actually more books than I read in all of 2020. In fact, I think that's more books than I've read in any year ever in my whole life. And we're only halfway through. I am on track to reach 100 books by the end of the year, which would be absolutely insane, and I'm hoping that we make it to it, because that would just, it really would just make me so happy. So continuing along, I have read 20,587 pages. I am averaging 74.53 pages per day, which is not quite my goal of 100, but also really not bad considering that I completely fell off the bandwagon in May. I'm averaging 9.5 books per month, which I figure is pretty good. Breaking down my books, I have read 42 books in print, 8 digital books, and 8 audiobooks so far this year. Of those, 56 have been fiction and 2 have been nonfiction, which is more nonfiction books than I have read in any year since I've been tracking, which I think is 2016. So that's great. Going to try to keep that up. Something that I found pretty interesting. This is really the first year I've even read any adult novels. And I've actually read more adult novels this year than I've read YA novels, which is kind of crazy to think about. I read 28 adult novels, 5 middle grade novels, and 25 YA novels. In terms of the genre breakdown, I am still reading overwhelmingly fantasy books. More than 50% of my reading is fantasy, but it is still more diverse this year than it was last year, and that's a pro for sure. So far I've read 5 contemporary, 8 sci-fi, 32 fantasy, 3 romance, 1 historical fiction, 5 mystery, 2 horror novels, and obviously the 2 nonfiction we discussed earlier. In terms of where those books came from, 11 of those books are from my own TBR, which is good, but not as many as it should be. 25 of those have come from the library, which is really good because it means I'm not buying a lot of books this year, but again, I still need to be reading more books for my own TBR. I have 16 of the books I've read in 2021 I have purchased this year. So at least of the books that I'm purchasing, I'm trying to read through them, so that's good too. I have read 3 arcs. 2 of the books I've read have been gifts, and 1 of the books I've read so far has been borrowed. In terms of the page count breakdown, I thought this was pretty interesting too. So I don't find it very surprising that the majority of my books fall between 300 and 400 pages. Not only is 300 to 400 pages a pretty typical book length, but I feel like a lot of YA novels fall within this page count. So not super surprising for that to be my highest. I was super shocked to see, though, that I have read 19 books that have had more than 400 pages. And And even more shocked to see that 11 have been more than 500 pages. I read a lot more big books this year than I think I ever have. And I think that's partially due to the Cosmere Crabalong and reading all of the Brandon Sanderson novels that I've read, which are all, you know, tomes. So I think that definitely is due to that. But just breaking it down, I've read 4 books that are less than 100 pages, 10 books that are between 100 to 200, 6 books that are between 2 to 300, 19 books between 3 and 400, 8 between 4 and 5, 7 between 5 and 6, 1 between 6 and 7, and 3 books that are greater than 700 pages. Continuing along into my ratings. I think looking at this acknowledges that I definitely am overrating the books that I'm reading. And I have to find some way to, I think almost everything needs to be shifted down a star, probably. I actually have quite a few 5-star reads that I've started giving this like bonus star. And I think I need to just acknowledge that if I feel like it's good enough to have a bonus star, it's the only actual 5-star read. Everything else is 4 stars and, you know, moving its way down. So in terms of the ratings I have right now, I have 3 3-star reads, 2 3.5-star reads, 15 4-star reads, 7 4.5-star reads, and 20 5-star reads. The majority of my books should not be 5. Well, I don't mean that. But the majority of my ratings, I feel like, should not be 5 stars unless I feel like I have just read, like, the most amazing books ever this year. And while I have read a lot of books that I'm like, oh my god, these were amazing, it's definitely not the majority of what I've read this year. So one of my goals for the rest of 2021 is to work on fixing my ratings here. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so that concludes my section on reading stats. So now we're going to move into my favorite books that I've read so far in 2021. I'm going to pick one book from every month. And like I said, we're going to talk about 2 for March because I just couldn't pick. So, starting in January, my favorite book that I read in January was, hands down, no questions asked, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. If you have not yet picked up this book and have somehow managed to ignore all of the booktube hype, I literally cannot encourage you enough to go pick this book up. Since I read it, I think I have recommended this to probably more than 10 friends, and I can think off the top of my head of at least 5 that have read it since I recommended it and were like, yep, you were right, this was really, really good. So if you're unfamiliar with this book, this centers around our main character of Evelyn Hugo, who is basically telling the tell-all story of her life. She is a Hollywood starlet who has had 7 husbands and kind of a crazy life through her escapades in Hollywood. She reaches out to a journalist named Monique and asks her to basically to basically, you know, write her biography and to publish it once she is no longer around. This book is an emotional roller coaster. It has a lot of ups and downs. It has a lot of plot twists and things that I personally didn't see coming. If you read other novels by Taylor Jenkins Reid, maybe you would see more of them coming because I think that's kind of her writing style. But overall, I really just adored it, and you definitely should pick it up. My favorite book that I read in February was easily House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is, again, another one of those super hyped booktube books, but 100% for a good reason. So if you're unfamiliar with this particular story, this centers around our main character of Linus, who is basically a social worker for magical children. One day he is asked by his superiors to go check out this house by the sea that basically houses some of the most dangerous, or perceived as dangerous, magical children in their particular world. There, Linus meets a whole slew of children with various magical powers and various personalities, and really starts to bond with a lot of these kids. Their caretaker, his name is Arthur, and he is honestly one of my favorite book characters that I've ever read. I think I found that this was particularly close to my heart given the nature of my job. But in general, I love this book and I would highly, highly recommend it. I also wanted to mention that both of the books I've mentioned so far also have LGBTQ plus rep. So if you're looking for books that involve that, I recommend that as well. So moving into March, like I said, we're going to talk about 2 books in March because I really could not pick between the 2. The first book that I want to mention is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. By this point in the year, I had read 2 other Brandon Sanderson novels and really wasn't super sold on whether I was going to continue or not until I read The Final Empire. This book is enthralling. The magic system is really fascinating, and it gives you an entire cast of characters that I felt like I just always wanted to read more of. There was not a perspective in the story that I didn't want or wasn't interested to read, hear from, etc., etc. And that I would say is true across the entire trilogy. To be honest, it was hard to pick whether this book or Hero of Ages was my favorite in the series. But I think that answer is The Final Empire, the first novel. And it really was excellent. If you're looking for an introduction to Brandon Sanderson's adult novels, I think this is a really good place to start. That'll give you a solid idea of what his writing style is like. The other book I wanted to talk about in March is Legendborn by Tracey Deonn. This is another super hyped booktube book, but man, oh man, was this for a good reason. So this book centers around our main character, Bree. Bree has just gone off to an early college program at a North Carolina college, and she ends up in a situation where she sees something that she's not supposed to see in regards to a magical society that is present on campus. In this society, it's very secret, so when the characters performing the magic realizes that she's overseen, they try to wipe her memory. And for some reason, it doesn't work. And that's kind of where the story begins and where it kind of develops, is that she becomes super interested in this magical society and wants to learn more about it. This book is also an Arthurian retelling that I think really takes the retelling and turns it on its head in terms of subverting expectations, and I really liked that as well. I also believe this is the first book in a series, and I cannot wait to read more of this. If you have not picked this up, I highly recommend it. My favorite book that I read in April this year was Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This book centers around our main character of Grace, who is very much a type A personality who plays by the rules and is hardworking and has kind of followed the entire path that has been set up for her to a T. After she graduates with her PhD, her dad and his girlfriend or wife, don't remember which one, buys her a trip to Vegas. And when she goes out to Vegas, she gets really drunk and gets married. And this is super out of character for Grace. And this story kind of just evolves from there, about Grace developing a relationship with her new wife and kind of sort of watching where the story goes, trying to figure out what she's going to do now that she has her PhD. My favorite part of this book, the plot was great. The characters were interesting. I really didn't have any qualms, but the thing that really sold me on this book is some of the poetic language that occurs between Grace and her girlfriend and the way they talk to each other. I think it's just so incredibly well written, and for a romance novel is really above and beyond what I was expecting. And that is most definitely why this book made the list. So, acknowledging that I didn't read quite as much as I typically do in a month during May, I was kind of nervous that my pick for May really wouldn't fit up to the caliber of the rest of these books. But looking through the 5 books that I read in May, I definitely have one that I can talk about that I think is on par with the rest of these books, and that is wholeheartedly, without a doubt, Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This book centers around our main character of Spensa, and Spensa's entire life goal is to become a pilot for the Space Force of the particular colony that she's from. Unfortunately, the Space Force and her dad kind of have some beef, and as a result, she is basically treated very unfairly when it comes to her trying to get into flight school. Something kind of happens and works out, and that's where she ends up, and then the story just really evolves from there. The entire story is basically about Spensa trying every step of the way to prove herself to a society that, or at least to a higher power that really doesn't believe that she deserves to be there. And I won't talk more about what I liked about the book because the ending was fabulous and definitely sent down a different direction than I expected it to go, and it was really, really enjoyable. At this point, I have also read the sequel, which is, in my opinion, on par, and I have every intentions of picking up the 3rd book when it comes out soon. And the last book I have to talk about is my favorite book that I read in the month of June. And this is actually an arc that hasn't come out yet. This comes out August 19th. And I will not stop talking about how good this book is. And that is After the Dragons by Cynthia Zhang. Man, oh man, was this book so good. This book centers around our main characters of Eli and Kai. Eli is currently working on some research through a university in China, which is where his family is from, and that's how he meets Kai. His professor takes him to meet Kai's boss, who basically works to rehabilitate dragons. Kai, in particular, takes that really to heart and basically just finds dragons around the city to rehabilitate using the limited funds that he has. Eli becomes super interested in Kai because he sees something in him that really speaks to him, and the story really evolves from there. This book is not super long. I think it's only 200 pages, but it was enthralling. And my only qualm with this book is that I wanted it to be longer. The story was great. I read this so incredibly fast, it's not even funny. And I know it's short, but I literally could not put this book down. I think if this book had been 500 pages, I still would have read it just as fast. It was just incredible, and I highly encourage you guys to pick this up when it comes out in August. Alright friends, so that's everything that I have to talk about in terms of my mid-year check-in. Like I said, my real main goal for the rest of 2021 is to try to get to 100 books, which seems like I am going to be able to do that. And to try to work on my rating system so that I'm rating books a little more realistically. We'll see how that goes. Either way, checking in on my goals that I set at the beginning of this year. I'm not quite reading at 100 pages per day like I was hoping to, but I figure 75 really isn't that bad, especially considering that I've read 57 books already this year. I'm pretty pleased with that progress. I think I've been doing a decent job at keeping up with my YouTube channel, with the exception of May, and like we discussed, that's just a hard month for me in general. And I think those were the only 2 real goals that I set. So like I said, I have 2 more for the rest of 2021, and we'll check in at the end of the year and see how things went. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I am on a new mission to post videos every 5 to 6 days. So look forward to that, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye!